I'm going to put forward a very simple idea this morning, which is that I think Wales needs a charity regulator of its own. And we have coming out with this talk, we've got a blog coming out on our newsletter this morning, I should say in both English and Welsh, setting out the ideas as well, and indeed we've released the basic notion to the media. But let me give you, particularly because Lindsay's going to be fiercely chairing, so I can't go over time, the reasons why I think it's important for Wales to have a charity regulator of its own. The first, and perhaps the most obvious, and I hope you can read out at the back, is that Wales is not England. We had devolution to Wales from 97 onwards, moving a whole range of powers into Wales. And I cannot see any reason why we should not be moving the regulation of charities in there as well, because you already have a whole range of services, the education service and the health service. And my basic argument is, I think if you want charities to have an extra push to thrive in Wales, having a regulator of your own is enormously important. We do some research at NFP Synergy into what the Welsh public think about charities. We track awareness of charities, we track a whole range of things, and if you're interested in some of the specifics of that, my colleagues and I, Kieran and Sophie, are happy to talk to you. But we also ask people what kinds of charities they want to support and what kinds of Welsh charities they want. And if you then ask that question of people, what you discover is that people would prefer to support a Welsh charity. About 50% of the Welsh public would prefer that over a UK charity with a Welsh office, only 10% that. That isn't to say that they all want their money to be spent in Wales. That's roughly evenly split. So when we said to people, where would you like your money to be spent? 40% say across the UK is fine with me, and 40% say in Wales or to a local charity. So the real issue is that the Welsh public have a strong bias towards supporting Welsh causes and Welsh charities, but their regulator is not a Welsh charity regulator. The other regulators tend to be either UK-wide, so you look at Ofcom, you look at Ofwat, you look at Ofgem, dealing with water and power and communications. They are UK-wide. Or you tend to have regulators or non-departmental government bodies who are Welsh-based. So you had Estefin, if I pronounced that right, who is the equivalent of Ofsted, looking at the education system. You have natural resources for Wales based in the single non-departmental public body. It's very difficult to find another body who just does England and Wales. And that's, I think, a real problem. And partly, and I'll get onto this in a moment, it depends on how the regulator looks after the Welsh bit of its remit. So what's interesting is Ofcom, based across the UK, has an advisory committee for Wales. I don't need to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The Welsh charity sector has a separate identity. It is a different kind of being from the English charity sector. There are far less of the enormous charities working across the globe in Wales, and lots more local charities, and the sector is different in Wales. And therefore, my belief is the way that the regulation needs to take place and what empowers charity in Wales and community organisations in Wales is going to be different from what it is in England. You have a lot more of the enormous salary worries with charities in England, and I suspect you have slightly less of that with the charities in Wales. So regulation needs to be appropriate to the sector that you're regulating. And that's one of the reasons that I think the devolution of power of any kind of regulator makes sense, because the regulator can then adapt to the local needs in question. And in Wales, I think that's particularly important. Spinning out of that is the needing to know the size and the shape of the Welsh charity sector. And indeed, some of you will know Garfield Weston sponsored a report a few years ago looking at some of the issues to do with what was going on in Wales. And it said there are a whole bunch of particular needs. One of them is raising money is different in Wales from what it is in England, and therefore you need to promote the fundraising. And I do believe a separate charity regulator would be enormously powerful in boosting levels of trust in Wales, and also making sure that it could adapt to any particular fundraising challenges in Wales as well. So I think that whole idea that you are going to identify. Now I know that WCVA has done a whole bunch of work themselves on the size and the shape and issues to do with Welsh charity regulation, Welsh charities. But I challenge you to go and look at the Charity Commission website and find information about what is happening with charities in Wales. Indeed, I challenge you to go and find Welsh language documents on the Charity Commission website. And my guess is, but you may tell me I'm wrong, that you probably only get the Charity Commission newsletter in English and not in Welsh. The other devolved nations of the UK have their own charity regulator. So we have OSCA, the Office for Scottish Charity Regulation in Scotland. We have Charity Commission Northern Ireland, which is about 5 to 10 years old and is still growing and developing its work. And indeed, the Republic, which I do realise is not part of the UK, of Ireland, is developing its own charity regulator. So Wales is an anomaly in not having its own charity regulator and being latched on to London. And indeed, one of the reasons that devolution is so important is that by and large, London is not very good at managing the Welsh nation or the Scottish nation or Northern Ireland accordingly. And that's why devolution of power has taken place. The public are reassured by knowing about charity regulators. We did some work with some focus groups, and we say to people, what do you know about the Charity Commission? This was in London. And actually, they love knowing that there is a charity regulator. It's astonishing in some cases how little they know about charity regulator. But when you say there's somebody who makes sure that accounts are submitted, there's somebody who makes sure that frauds are looked into, all of that is enormously reassuring to people. But the problem is that when that regulator is based in London, and I have to say the Charity Commission disagrees that they are based in London, they say they're based in Liverpool and that's their head office, which I have to tell you, their argument is that Liverpool is really quite close to Wales, and so that's okay. I'm not sure that's very convincing from my point of view. However, when you say to people, there's a regulator, it does these things, they go, that's great. And I think that's much less likely to be happening when you have the Charity Commission for England and Wales rather than having the Charity Commission for Wales. The Charity Commission has no strategy for Wales, or probably to be more accurate, what it actually has is a strategy for England and Wales is simply lumped in. And my argument is there are different needs and responses to charity regulation in Wales, and the regulator needs to be doing that. But if you go and look at the document of strategic intent published last October, it says nothing about Wales. And when I say nothing about Wales, it literally means it only mentions Wales in connection with England. And I think you need local regulation according to what's going on, not something which says this is what England needs, oh, and by the way, Wales is tagged on. So there is no clear strategy in either the document of strategic intent or the annual report, which sets out the needs for Wales separately and differently. And when you look at the day-to-day administration of what happens in Wales, there is no Welsh-specific content or whatever. Now, my understanding is the Essential Trustee is a document that is based in, has been translated into Welsh, but there is very little else. There's very little evidence that they are making an attempt to do things differently. I'm sure they will tell you that they have an annual public meeting based somewhere in Wales once a year and so on and so on. But Ofcom, UK-wide, can have a Welsh advisory body, but the Charity Commission doesn't appear to have that. And it'd be interesting to know, some of you may know the Charity Commission has a board member who is actually designed to have specific responsibility for Wales. But when a journalist asked them the other day, could they tell us whether any of the board members lived in Wales who spoke Welsh, they refused to answer on the basis that that was personal information. And indeed, it's very difficult when you look at the biography, and it's only a biography on the website of the Charity Commission with specific Welsh responsibility. It's very difficult to see what the Welsh connection is, other than they are a non-exec board member of the Monmouthshire Building Society. Now again, if you want Wales to be well looked after, I think you need people who understand Wales, who are probably based in Wales, ideally who speak Welsh, on the Charity Commission's board. And there's no evidence that they have any of that at the moment. And then lastly, and I think the point is, if you want charity regulation to make what happens in Wales thrive, I think it should be accountable to the Welsh Government and the Welsh Assembly, not to the Westminster Government and all the London-based entities that you have. And that's simply because who is more likely to make the community organisations, the charities and charity regulation flourish in Wales? Is it the work of the Welsh Government or is it the work of the Westminster Government? And I would argue every single time that it was almost certainly to be what was the Welsh Government and what was happening in Wales rather than what was happening in London. So my overall argument is that in order to make the Welsh charity sector move faster, do more, be better, having a separate Welsh regulator is the right thing to do. And I think that for the whole host of reasons. So even if tomorrow the Charity Commission turned around and had an amazing set of activities for Wales, I think I would still be making this argument that you should do things right. And in particular, if you look at how Wales is being given less good treatment on the separate charity regulation than Scotland or Northern Ireland, I think you guys in Wales need to be making the argument that this would help. And the budget doesn't need to be huge. What I'm forever being told, for those of you who know, and I talked at the annual public meeting of the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland, is that it is based above a chip shop in Newry. We are not talking about grand organisations and amazing offer blocks. We're talking about having a presence in Wales. So the Charity Commissioner for Northern Ireland is a public figure who can answer questions, who knows what's going on in Northern Ireland. And I don't think there's any evidence that there's equivalent to that for what's happening in Charity Wales. So my argument is a simple one. To help the Welsh charity sector fly, having a separate charity regulator would add to the impetus and the energy and the power that events like this are already bringing to the development of charities, and I think it could be done relatively simply and relatively easy, and I think it would make a substantive difference to what you were going to discover was an appropriate set of regulation for you and your work as charities in Wales. Thank you very much.